Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have so many wonderful educators joining us from across the United States and internationally as well. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. My name is Liza Lowe, and I'm affiliate faculty at Antioch University, New England, and the director of Inside Outside, a professional network for educators who are using nature, place, and the outdoors for teaching and learning. If you haven't already joined the network, we welcome you to do so. It's free and has lots of resources to support teachers who are doing this work, teachers such as yourself. And we are grateful for the generous support of the George B. Storer Foundation, which helps us provide events such as these free. And I'll put a link in the chat box so you can visit our website. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I live in Chesterfield, New Hampshire, where that orange arrow is pointing. The land where I live, raise my children, keep chickens, tap maple trees is Wabanakik, which translates to the land of the dawn or the dawn land. This is the ancestral homeland of the Sokoke band of the Abenaki people or Abenaki people. We invite and encourage each of you to learn about the land where you live and the indigenous people whose rightful land it is. And if you're interested, and we hope you are, in learning more about the indigenous people where you live, I'll put a couple websites in the chat box for you to start learning more. The film we're about to watch, Turning School Inside Out, is about 20 minutes long. It takes place at a school in Chesterfield, New Hampshire, just in the southwestern corner of the state, which borders the state of Vermont. So the film is about 20 minutes long. We'll watch the film together, and then we'll come back together to have a Q&A with three panelists, three fabulous teachers from the school who are featured in the film. If for some reason there are technical glitches as we make our way through the film, then you can visit our website and find the link, and I'll put the link in the chat box also, so that you can access the film directly and watch it on your computer screen directly instead of through Zoom with us. So there's the link to the film, and we'll gather back together for the Q&A after the film. Enjoy. So I hope everyone enjoyed the film. And you can also feel free to share it with others by accessing the link on our website. I just want to take a minute to introduce our panelists before we launch into the Q&A. We have three teachers joining us from Chesterfield School. Laura White has 18 years of public school experience teaching 4th through 6th grade. This is her 5th year teaching at Chesterfield School as a 5th grade teacher. Laura has a master's in education from Antioch University. Jenna Gitchell has been in education for over 25 years. This is her 19th year teaching 4th grade at Chesterfield School. She's in her last semester at Antioch, earning a master's degree in place-based education. And this is Amy Randall's 5th year teaching kindergarten at Chesterfield School. After 5 years of teaching middle school science, Amy has a master's in education from Lesley University, and she is the 2014 recipient of the Lisa K. Henkel Award for Excellence and Inclusion. So now I invite you to put your questions in the chat box, and as we move through the rest of the evening, I'll just pull questions from the chat box and ask them directly to Laura and Jenna and Amy. And when you put your questions in the chat box, be sure to choose to everyone so we all see. Also, the link is in the chat if you want to watch the film on your own, and a little bit does talk about how the land was acquired, but do one of you want to speak to that a little bit?
I can speak a little bit to it. I mean, I think it said in the film that the family that owned the land approached the school and the principal was on board and she got the school board on board. and it had to go through a process, a warrant article in town, at least in New Hampshire. Everything's it's very local democracy. So the citizens have to come to a meeting and vote to approve the school budget every year. We're a little school. We have our own school board just for our school of about 300 students. And the town residents have to approve that budget. And that's a separate article, separate from the school board. And it was a little bit contentious. I think it passed by 61%. So there were definitely people that didn't think that about $80,000 should be spent on land for the school. But in the end, it passed. And we're very grateful because it's just transformed things at the school.
And Jenna, maybe you want to start talking about this, but I bet all three of you will have something to say about the process of taking your curriculum units from inside your classrooms outside.
Absolutely. I think that I was, out of the three of us, I was the last one to jump on board on doing this, the most recent one. And I actually started by taking a workshop with Liza and just getting myself comfortable with making that transition outside, because it can feel overwhelming to some unless you have at least some staff members and peers that are willing to guide you and help you. And I haven't turned back. I mean, I spend a lot of time outside with my students now, and actually was just meeting with my advisor prior to this meeting, and came to that realization that my teaching is so much more relaxed when I'm outside. So it's only natural that my school babies are feeling the same way.
And Laura or Amy, do either of you want to speak to that too?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Just how the process for yourself as a teacher, how did you move from like strictly teaching inside to outside? What was that process like for you?
Well, I mean, I came to school-based education from more environmental education. So, I started kind of teaching outside and wanting to bring that to the school. And that's what I became an educator, feeling like, and after working in some of these environmental ed centers where the kids are outside for a week, but it's just 1 week of their year. So it's kind of like been a full circle for me. And it's definitely, a transition when you're working in a public school where you're having to teach a whole variety of standards. Is very different than being in a nature-based program where they come for a week and you're not responsible for making sure they know all their letters and all those kinds of things. So it's not like I'm outside all the time, but it's amazing how much you can actually do the regular curriculum outdoors. And that's one message I just want to have as a takeaway, is you can do this in the normal curriculum that you have: reading, writing, science. You saw a lot of science in the film, but actually our program, we do a lot of writing outside, as well as math as well.
And Liza, I would add, being that it's kindergarten, you and I were just chatting before we started about some of the free play that happens out there in the forest, in the white pine kingdom, as we call it. And some children were doing some pushing and some pulling, and now Mrs. Randall is ready to do her pushing and pulling unit. And thanks to Liza, she gave me some ideas about pulleys and how to use them outside. And, for kindergarten teachers, right, that's a pretty easy thing in your brain to put a bunch of things on a table inside your classroom and see what the kids do with them. The box of blocks, a box of Legos, what do the kids do with them? Well, the same thing can happen outside. Like, what are the kids interested in? And then take that and run with it, and think after the fact of, what standard are they showing me they would like to learn more about, rather than, I'm going to plan this wonderful thing and I know it's this standard and we're going to do it outside. You can do that too, but following the kids' lead is pretty magnificent. So now I'm pulling all my resources to do push and pull, because that's what they're wanting me to teach. So.
And there's a question about how often and for how long are the students outside? And I know that this varies from teacher to teacher and classroom to classroom, but maybe you want to all sort of say for yourselves how you're doing that.
Yeah, I would say kindergarten goes out for about an hour and a half once a week. We also have another block of time that we've scheduled that is kind of that we share with second grade. Um, Laura, you would know probably what the whole school is, but I think currently this year we have slotted time for every grade level. Am I right about that, Laura?
Every grade level K-5 has at least a 40-minute block scheduled in weekly. And then I know Jenna, I think, is the one that's using it the most. I know 5th grade this year for me, I do it's almost a 2-hour block once a week for both of our 5th grade classes. And then we sometimes go out on an individual basis. Last year was a little different with the pandemic, we were out a lot more often, but this year we have a different schedule that's limited the transition back and forth. And then middle school is much more on a case-by-case basis, largely because the schedule is really challenging when you have a 40-minute block to get down there and come back up.
Another question is, do the teachers across grades and classes collaborate on safety procedures, learning outside and participating in risky activities?
We actually are, all of us, including Liza, are on an outdoor ed committee together. And that's something that we've decided as a committee we would rather handle rather than placing that on our teachers. So we are actually planning on putting together something like explaining to the staff what's a risk, what's a hazard. And a prime example was one of my students said to me today, can I climb a tree? And I was like, sure, I don't know, can you? Like, what's the, and like a little tiny monkey climbed right up it with no branches on it. And I'm thinking at 49, oh my goodness, I can't even like jump and I'm feeling achy. And he kept looking at me like, is this okay? Is this okay? And I said, remember what we talked about, and guiding them through, what was safe, what was appropriate. And we established those as a class. And also what my comfort level was. I explained to them that it fell on my shoulders to make sure that they were safe whenever they were with me. That's their number one priority. And when they went with another teacher, it could be different, and that was okay. So
there's this question. Oh, sorry.
And I think that's a good point. Jenna said it does also depend on the teacher. There are definitely some teachers that are not comfortable with climbing trees and others that are, or might have slightly different things. So in terms, like the question was about collaboration on that. And I think that there's a certain amount of collaboration, like we're next week offering a walkthrough for staff to join us to talk about safety issues that might be outside and how to address them and build some of that comfort level and having your students take those risks. And we're also very, I think the whole process at the school has been really organic to allow teachers to dip their toes into outdoor ed at their comfort level and their pace. And that's helped facilitate it instead of feeling like a top-down mandate.
There are two questions that I'm going to sort of push together into one. It's about gear and then sort of introducing teaching and learning outside to families. So how you all are handling that, and maybe also how the school as a whole is handling it, making sure that children have the right gear that they need to be outside, but also just talking about this thing of taking learning outside.
I can talk to gear a little bit. I put it on my school supply list at the beginning of the year that they have to have rain pants and raincoat and boots. And I also have gathered over the years a pretty large collection in the classroom for families that might not have them in need or kids that forget. So we're prepared to go out, rain or shine. And I'm pretty strict about that. We go out, rain or shine, unless there's like thunder and lightning, or, our school has a policy about a certain temperature, which we can't go outside if it's below that. And so by establishing that, there's just that kind of expectation that you bring your gear to school and you don't forget it. I don't know if Amy, if you want to talk about kindergarten level with the gear.
I think gear for kindergarten, mommy and daddy already provide a lot of that cold weather gear and whatnot. So we have our rare group of children that might not have supplies, and we've amassed a lot. And by the way, Laura, if you saw those red boots, I brought those to your classroom because they're a little bit big for kindergartners. I thought if somebody in your grade level had a little bit smaller feet, that you could benefit from them. So that's kind of what we do. It's like a community of what we'd like. I think in our future plans for our school is to have kind of like this closet that would have those kinds of supplies in it, and gear for children to wear certainly would be helpful. Kindergarten doesn't go out if it's like pouring rain and that one, but we go out when it's muddy and it's drizzly and that just because. So.
I would say too, sort of jumping off of what Laura said, this is, I think it's very much an ongoing process at this school. And maybe you all would say something different, but to me as a parent from the outside, it seems like it's an ongoing process. And so this idea of communicating to families and then also sort of stocking the school, this also is a process that we're in right now, making sure that there, that there's the clothing, but also tools to be outside. So it's not the film is beautiful, and it's not a done deal. Like it's still a in process kind of thing. Oh, you're muted.
And if I could jump on, Liza, could I jump in just for a second, Liza? Because I think that you will be so shocked within your community about if you just put out there like, oh, I need some size 6 rubber boots. Some grandparent is going to thank you, and then you're going to get more size 6 boots. They know what to do, and exactly what just happened that Amy was talking about. You can share it across grade levels, and my spouse is so used to our laundry room during the non-winter months just being taken over by the coats and snow pants, and then once winter season comes, it goes to school, and anybody can borrow it.
And also, like, now it's been 5 years or so into this, and now the families that had kindergartners, their kindergartners have grown out of their boots, and a lot of times the boots get donated to the school. So it kind of, there's a snowball effect, and it gets easier.
There's also a question about administration and how would you say that administration, the principal and school board influenced what you're doing? And yeah.
I don't think that we have a bigger advocate for outdoor learning than Sharon Dion, to be honest with you. She has just done a wonderful, amazing thing way back when she introduced Harris Center to our school. I think that's always been her priority. You can hear in the film how excited she is, and she looks at that as more than just a science connection. She talked about the wellness of our students, and the more that you're outdoors there, the more with your students, the more you'll see that it's more than just being outside. It's for their whole self. And that idea of place-based learning, Mrs. Dion, our principal, she totally knows that this Chesterfield community is really wrapped around all these students in many different ways.
And I think her role has been, I mean, different schools approach this differently. I know there's schools where the principal says, this is what we're doing, and they say the teachers have to do this, and you can get a lot done that way too. And Chesterfield, it's manifested sort of the other way. The support from the school board and the principal has been in the purchasing of the land, but then from there on out, a lot of it has really been done by community volunteers and teachers organizing and deciding what we want. You saw that the visioning process in the film, and that was sort of organized by the land use committee, but the principal allowed us to use staff meeting time. So it was more of a making space for these things to happen, which is really important, and also allowing the staff and the community to have a voice in how it was going to roll out.
There's also a question about, so back to the risk, that topic, how does the school as a whole handle it? And are there sort of more specifically, are there waivers or sort of insurance implications that you could speak to be considered for all students to participate?
I can say that we don't currently have a waiver, although it has come up in conversation at our committees, and we've talked about having one and then talking about, well, how that creates a problem if kids don't return it. What do you do if the kids don't have a return it? And we've talked about having one where it's just like an opt out, and then just, I think it's basically, we've decided not to do it at all because they're on campus. And this is just an expectation that this is part of our school, just like our PE program or playground recess. I mean, honestly, there's more injuries that happen on the playground than out in the outdoors. So it's assumed that if your child's coming to school, this is something they're doing. And that's one of the things that's been really wonderful, is if we just even step right off campus to go to the cemetery across the street or the forest across the street, we need a permission slip, but we don't need to go to the forest that's on the campus. So no, we don't, but it has been discussed.
And I think too, at the part about family communication, parent guardian communication, again, it's like an ongoing process. So actually, Jenna and other folks from the Outdoor Education Committee have created a handbook that's really for staff at this point, for teachers. But part of the idea is that some of that will shift so that it'll, I think my understanding is, so that it'll fold into the communication that goes home to families at the beginning of the school year in preparation for outdoor learning.
And I think also another, in creating that handbook, I leaned on our amazing nurse a lot, and her comfort level with Ed. We're very lucky, again, with the nurse that we have at our school. She's very honest with us about what her comfort level is. And for example, when I put in about fire and starting fires down in the land, her immediate response was, "Oh my gosh, what are you trying to do? Kill me?" And and it made me laugh. But once I had the conversation with her and explained to her, how we were going to approach it, and that it was going to be people that were trained in it, comfortable with it, I knew that when I brought her fear down, if I could get her fear down, then I would be okay. I would, I had a good advocate in our side. So get your nurse on board.
And thinking about that, parent and community members, what's interesting in the film, I won't point out which person was a community member that was a little hesitant about this process, ended up being one of our advocates for this whole idea of purchasing the land. And that was because that person got involved. And also you saw in the film that we had this, our committee, outdoor ed committee, made I guess you could call it we did a book walk. We set up stations all around the pieces of the lands, and we invited families in with their children, and their children have gained such a love for the place that we call Chesterfield School. And now that's expanded into our 2 outdoor classrooms. And the children brought their families and showcased it for us. We really didn't even have to we just set up the opportunity. So that would be key to getting buy-in from parents and communities, and to invite them to your space.
I just want to, in terms of the whole risk thing, I think the two items that I've had the most conversation are ticks and fire. A lot of the teachers really want to have a fire circle in the outdoor classroom, and the administration has been very hesitant about that because of certain liability reasons. And so I think, as a principal, you wear a different hat and you have different things you have to think about. And so oftentimes we bump up against, well, we want this, but the principal knows all these other legal things that she has to go through, jump through those hoops. And so, it's definitely a conversation we're having. And we've reached some middle ground in terms of I'm allowed to do the fire unit in winter when there's snow on the ground. We get permits from, the fire warden, but there's no fire circle out there. And we use a Kelly kettle, and that's okay. So there's kind of a middle ground we have right there with that. Ticks are the other big thing. Last spring was a horrible tick season. I think Jenna maybe can speak a little bit about how she dealt with that, because that was a place you'll have a lot of fear and pushback with parents that are uncomfortable, and maybe they don't go outside and they get a tick and they can freak out.
So I turned the fear into actually what we call a TikTok. I played off of what is going all over in social media, and I turned it into a math lesson. So we actually ended up math and geography, science, and we collected data about where ticks were found more often on campus, and literally collected them, took them off the students, and turned them into a bar graph, turned it into a pie chart, figured out the math behind it. And at the beginning of the unit, when I had students that were screeching and screaming whenever they found a tick, then it turned into just tick, and they'd go get the tape, take it off, and then it was like data. They were so calm. And the feedback was that I had a lot more parents who were saying that their students had like little or no fear about being outside now, and that may have been the one thing that they were nervous about. So I think I use that example because every opportunity you can turn it into some learning experience for your students when you're out there. Just give yourself and give them a chance. And they wrote that unit for me. I had no like idea of even doing that, but it was the kids that drove that. So, and now it's an expectation. My new class this year, they're like, when are we doing the TikTok? What's happening? You know, when are we starting to collect that data? So
there's a question about COVID and sort of the impact of COVID on how long are students going out longer than before, and have schedules or lessons changed as a result of COVID?
absolutely. I think that last year, I spent, that was the change for me. That was the year that I started to realize that it was safer outside. The science behind it was showing it that we were safer. And then that opened the door for me realizing that I could do it. And it kind of, I guess the silver lining in a horrible pandemic was that it opened my eyes that I was capable, the students were capable. And like Laura said, now it is part of my day. And if I don't go outside, I get kind of cranky.
I think for me, it's varied. Last year in the fall, we had a lot of tents, and I had a tent for my classroom. So I was outside pretty much 95% of the day, but not in the outdoor classrooms. We were under a tent doing our regular lessons, and then sometimes in the outdoor classroom. This year, we don't have that tent. And I also have a different schedule and a different class. And so we are back to kind of what I was pre-COVID, where we have a long extended block once a week, and then we go out from time to time. And that's, I think that I go out more for right now. I have a student in a wheelchair, so we are not outside as much as we would be, but we would just go outside onto the lawn and do our normal lessons that we would do inside outside due to COVID. But it's not necessarily making me be down in the outdoor classroom as often as it was last year, but definitely outside more.
And then there's a question about how outdoor educational spaces can be transformative to New Hampshire education. And so do you see kids, and we were actually talking about this before we all jumped on, do you see kids who have grown from the experience in the 5 years or so that since the land has been purchased, and have other districts or schools reached out about how they can bring this into their schools?
Liza and I were reminiscing about the very first year that when the land was purchased, Nancy Hardy, the other kindergarten teacher, and I were trucking through without any pathways. We were going through the briar bushes to get out there to find the little pine grove, and we were playing in those trees. And that was 5 years ago. And those children right now are in Jenna's class. And she and I haven't really chatted about, what that experience is. Having a group of kids that's always known our outdoor learning environment at Chesterfield School. So that's really interesting. And I would also add to asking about have other districts and schools reached out. We had a kindergarten consortium of sorts with the SAU 29 kindergarten teachers. And it was another person from Antioch University that led our group. And we did some tours in each of the different schools, and we kind of supported one another of where would you have your space if you could have a space on your current property. And so we learned a lot from one another. I know, Jenna, you had done something with Liza, and Liza, you might want to talk about how we supported one another in the SAU, and maybe also Liza could talk about the Vermont group that wants to kind of partner with us.
Yeah, so through Antioch University, I ran a PLC, a professional learning community. And actually it was originally pitched to the Chesterfield teachers. And then we ended up opening it up to other schools, teachers in other schools. And I think it ended up being a really great opportunity for some cross-pollination between teachers at different schools, but also for the teachers within one school or in the same district to sort of hear from each other and learn with each other. So those professional learning communities, I think, are really powerful to teachers. And what was the other thing you had said, Amy?
About Guilford School.
Oh, yeah. And so I think just as other schools, so one of the things that Antioch does is they have a branch called the Antioch Center for School Renewal. And within that, there's professional development opportunities that come up as administrators reach out to Antioch and say, okay, how can we support our teachers doing this work? And then Paul Bacco and other folks help make that kind of thing happen and help schools connect with one another. And there's a question, so sorry, before I move on, is that all? Do we want to say anything else? There's a question about the outdoor ed committee and who sits on it and how did the group form?
It originally formed after the land was bought, and one of the school board members was tasked with chairing a land use committee, and people joined that. And then after a year, it was clear that kind of the original, I guess, goals for that committee in terms of transitioning and figuring out the land were kind of outside the purview of the board and now more focused on education and teachers. So it was sort of transitioned into a teacher-led group. But the school board member continued to sit on that committee and also parents. So I think we have like 7 or 8 teachers and that come often regularly, and then a school board member and at least 2 parents. And am I missing anyone? So the principal comes when she can. And then, you know, from time to time, we've had community members come as well, like members of the Chesterfield Conservation Commission or other environmental consulting firms where a meeting needs that.
I think the other thing I want to point out is I just want to share the link to Inside Outside, which is a professional network for teachers, because there are local chapters that's part of that network. And so those local chapters are an opportunity. If you're not a part of a professional learning community at the moment, those local chapters, and anyone can join any chapter anywhere, are an opportunity just to jump on with like-minded teachers and just hear how people are doing things and get ideas and feel supported in this work as well. We probably have time for one more question if anyone has another question, and hopefully I've gotten everything so far. Is there anything, Jenna, Amy, or Laura, that you want to say in closing?
I just want to say that I think it's a really great opportunity for that project-based learning. Like Jenna said, that the tictograph that she made, one thing that happened since the film was made was we had a pavilion built, and my class ended up having to do the seating, which became a math activity because they had to calculate the area while they were learning double-digit multiplication. And that's the kind of learning that I feel like that sticks with kids. And it's sometimes hard to do that in the classroom. So I just put a plug in for that project-based learning.
Anything else? Well, so thank you all for being here tonight. It's really great to see so many different people from so many different stretches of our planet, really, people joining internationally as well. And I just want to wish you all well as you move through another school year, and hoping that you found inspiration from the film to, if you're not doing it already, just do any little way that you can. If it's bringing nature into your classroom as a first step, or just take your students out for a story or to do a little poetry or journal work. It can be really, really simple to start, and it can grow from there. You can inspire your colleagues. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you to Jenna and Amy and Laura for giving your time and sharing your expertise. All right.
Thank you.
Take care.